Everyone, depending where you are, so welcome. This is Nature Echoes on this holiday Sunday in Ireland, 6th of August 2023. It's a lunar holiday. Thank you for joining me. And this is our weekly time of echoing news, stories, sometimes poetry and art, and connecting this to nature folklore and our precious water, the holy wells, woodlands, hedges, and wildlife. So hail, how whole, and holy good health to you all, and trust you're having a wonderful weekend. It's been lovely, mainly lovely weather on this holiday Sunday afternoon here in Ireland. Now, through this edition, we're going to be focusing on the legend and mythology and folklore of the Cauldrons of Posey. And that's the backcloth. And it's some reason I'm not getting any reaction. Let's see why I'm not getting any reaction. There we go. That's what we got. Exploring the Cauldrons of Posey, and a bit of gratitude for the lunar harvest as well. And we've got the latest with Journaling Nature Folklore course and other news. And this Nature Echoes Live, plus the growing nature folklore, the videos, the articles, the photo library, and the Journaling Nature Folklore course modules. They're all brought to you due to the support of our kind subscribers. I'm very grateful for, and that's the link there for subscribing. Let's see if I can get there we go. I got it right this time. And there's a free subscription level. You get access to at least 40 informative nature folklore articles. In fact, in the last week or two, you've been getting one a day because I've been catching up with the Crom Croc and Crom Dove series. And if you upgrade to become a sports subscriber, then that includes my Journaling Nature Folklore course of 20 course modules a year. And you can join that any time because it's a revolving course, not a linear one. And you get the latest updates because I'll be adding to it every year. Modules will be updated each year, so there's always something new. And as soon as possible, I'll get going with the 4-season online live workshops and also get-togethers offline as well. The cost is €5 a month, or go for the 50% discount at €30, which I'm still getting away with, even though Substack's trying to get me up to 50 a year. So thank you for your support. That's why I'm still broadcasting. Helps to cover the monthly fees. And so with that show, Survival Pledge, Strive Sorted. Let's see who we've got. I see there's quite a lot of people coming on board here. And there's Josie Posey. Hello there. And Fairy Tales Old and New. Thank you very much from Southeastern USA. Thank you for joining. And people are sort of coming and going, wondering what on earth is going on here. Then I get a number thing of how many are online, and usually it sort of starts building up very quickly, but it's sort of on a sort of ebb and flow at the moment. Anyway, we'll get going with this. I was going to share an echo on the life and deeds of a man called Sid Rawle, also was known. He's actually not with us anymore. He used to be called King of the Hippies. And what I was going to focus on was their time on John Lennon's island in Clew Bay County. We've had that one, haven't we? Yeah, there we go. That's a rough picture of the island they were on in Clew Bay. I forget its name. And there's an aerial photograph of the island. Quite a story to that, but I'll leave it to another time. And I'll leave that lad there as well to a few minutes. But really, I've come up with another echo idea. And this came up. And I've put the Sid Echo aside because the last Sid is, I'm getting stories through from other people that it seems he may be like other people I've admired who've actually ended up being revealed as secret cruel predators. I'm thinking of people like Bill Cosby and Rolf Harris, who had inspired thousands, maybe millions of children to have the courage and confidence in their expression of art. And then he has that horrible background. What a waste that was. Anyway, I don't know if I'll actually be doing a Sid Echo in the future. I'm going to find out more, but there does seem to be some awkward background stories. I hope I'm not looking too great. I was really having a problem getting my lighting sorted out earlier, so I hope I don't look too weird. There's like blotches and so forth. I'm using the same lighting, so maybe it's because of the sweater color I decided to put. Anyway, well, we'll press on with this. Anyway, what I did here this week was wonderful, and I showed you the man a moment ago. There we are. Let's get him on. That's Donegal illustrator and artist is Sean Fitzgerald, and he's also illustrating the upcoming Holy Wells book. Thousands of people must be looking forward to the Holy Wells book that's been put together by Sarah Humble. Now, Sean, he's also creating illustrations for an upcoming book. These aren't the illustrations, but that gives you an idea of his style of illustrations. And as well as working with Sarah Humble, he's also putting a book together about the concept of the three cauldrons within our bodies. And Sean, he's invited me to contribute up to 1,500 words on my own personal experience with the subject of this book, The Three Cauldrons. And I have published articles on the Three Cauldrons in the past, but I just couldn't get to locate them. So I thought, why not make this my main Nature Echo this Sunday? And I've quickly put it together. So here it is, and I hope you find something wonderful about it. And we've got Wendy Gillison here from the Netherlands. Wonderful. Hello, Wendy. Great that you're with us. Fantastic. And the numbers are certainly going up now. So, right, it's great because this is a bank holiday here. And we've had a lovely Sunday. I know people have been out and about. I've been seeing some of the photos. I was out and about a bit, but I had this to get ready. Anyway, so here we go. Now, about the three cauldrons, here I'll put something up here. A poem is said, there's that man, that's an illustration of the poet Imogen of the Milesians, the sort of seer of the Milesians. And so what I'm going to be talking about is about a poem that's said to have descended from that cryptic man, I suppose I would say. But it's said that the first manuscript, there was a translation from what he said because it was oral. Imogen's poem was oral. It could be anything the way it was passed on. So it's actually told in the 7th century, that's when the first attempt was to actually put the three cauldrons down. But I'm very skeptical about that. And I get something else going here. But it seems to be our journey with the three cauldrons. So I'm going to be talking about is really our journey to the experience of the Embas Forestny, which I've talked about in other Nature Folklore and Nature Echoes times. It's all about visionary poetry, which is believed to be sacred and is association. It is associated, this visionary poetry, there are stories, mythology, legends associated with the deeds of many ancient people, such as Finn McCall, Cormac MacArt, Oisin, Fidelma, and Bridget, of course. But most of what we hear about with the ancient Forestny is through so-called Celtic and Gaelic reconstructionist what do you call it? Celtic romance, kind of this sort of thing that people gather up for. If I can get the picture up there, that type of thing. Some of you are familiar with joining in things like that anyway, but there was certainly reconstructive romance, Celtic romance, during the 16th century. It came very much to the fore in the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution. For a start, people could start to read and write then, people being prepared for the Industrial Revolution. And then during the 50s, when the Wickers were starting to get popular, driving my own family nuts with the way they were coming straight after World War II time, and the spirited cults, the cult culture of the 70s, the bloggers of the 90s, and the social media warriors like myself, of course, that we have at this present time. I have been engaged with what I share with you since the 50s. I was kind of encouraged very, very young by father's family. So as I've often repeated, I've been kind of absorbed with this since the 50s. So some people, they just call it neo-paganism. Others just call it bullshit. But the Cauldron of Posey is a name that we have today. It's a unique poem This gone through many translations. There's no chance of knowing what the original really is, but it's said to, the best of it is said to be preserved within a 16th century manuscript. I can't see it. I can't see any photographs of it very much. It's supposed to be in the Trinity College Library that's in Dublin. They do have a sort of a basement library that I once managed to hack into and get down there once, but I don't think I'll be able to do it again. It's quite amazing. You go down this tunnel, underwater tunnel. Yeah, it is almost literally underwater. You go through this tunnel anyway, and it's dripping, this long tunnel, drip, drip, drip from the rain. And then you go through these magical doors into this sort of basement, hidden basement, where you ask, tell the people what you want, and they give you these very old, hundreds of years old books with the silk thread, and you put the gloves on, all that type of thing. I had an amazing afternoon, nearly a day there once, but I haven't been able to sneak in since. Anyway, that's where the main reference to this is. I haven't got really good photos of it. I think this is about the best I can do for you. Apparently, there's a page from it. There we go. There's not much that you can make out of that, but just to give you some verification that it does exist. So when the 16th century manuscript was discovered, and I don't know when or by who, even in the 16th century, maybe in the library there, I'd find out. And maybe I should research further, but as I say, I put this together very quickly. But this scripted work, it's named the Cauldrons of Posey. That's the name that was actually applied in the 16th century. That wasn't the original naming of it. I don't know what the original naming was. Maybe it was just the Three Cauldrons. But it was the name that was applied to the script then. And supposedly describes poetry that is being created from within the internal cauldrons that are within our body. And that's actually, I don't know where that is. I did see it when I was at a Celtic art exhibition in the British Museum a few years ago. I don't know where they collected that one up from. I think it might have been from Scotland. But that's supposed to be the cauldron of inspired poetry, anyway, with those different figures on there. Anyway, this is allegedly the 16th century manuscript allegedly took medieval sourced Irish manuscript, or a manuscript that was dedicated to describing how each of us have three cauldrons. Here we go, this sort of thing. There's not very good imagery of this, but there we go. They got the three cauldrons in our body that's born within us to hold our well-being and to initiate our transformations. Now, reading this to me is like the philosophy of the seven chakras. But being Celtic or Gaelic, the philosophy, of course, is whittled down to three. Everything here in Ireland and sort of Gaelic land goes down to three. But this ancient manuscript reads like poetry that's mixed with prose. And it seems to be the whole thing seems to be an attempt at training poets, a training manual for poets, I suppose we can call it. But then the question is, what is a poet? So I'll somewhat express a change in those teachings and consider this as a manuscript as actually being a potential tool that we may seek to use. What have I got here? Especially as a source of inspiration. There we go. There's someone using some tools for inspiration there. And the Cauldrons of Posey that were scripted in Ireland, it's wonderful as a promotion to Fanfare Ireland's fame. That may be the reason in the 16th century why this was done. Because of Ireland being the home of the visionary poets and poetic seers. And here we have an artist's impression of the number one poetic seer being Ariel herself, playing the harp and sharing some kind of poetry for Ariel's Ireland. So what we call poetry today is the core of these three cauldrons. The original scribing of the Cauldrons of Posey, the 16th century people, they claimed it was dated 7th or 8th century. They credited that was scribed down as scribing the oral teaching or script of well, God, I can't pronounce his name. Imogen, isn't it? And you may know quite a lot about him. There's the famous poem that he was supposed to recite it to calm the storms down when the Milesians came to the south coast of Ireland. So he's told of being a poet, a bard seer, a magician, one of the Milesians who arrived on this island that's now Ireland. Now, the Milesians, to me, is a tribe that eventually, well, you've heard the story in various ways, I'm sure, a tribe that eventually claimed that it surfaced from the Tuatha Dé Danann, who went underworld to this sort of place. If I got it, there we go. I'll tell you about this in a moment, what this is. You can see it clearly, those two she-hills, fairy hills. And during past Nature Echoes and Nature Folklore, I've shared my views on how I believe the Milesians as a race is totally mythology. It represents, probably as a story that represents a complex migration that was happening at the time. But the Milesians, as a single unit, was made up. But as for Imogen, I don't believe that imagery of him is based on memories of a Milesian, but it's definitely based on fragments, I think, of memories of a very wise person of that sort of Bronze Age time. But after the legendary first scribing, supposedly 7th, 8th century, of what is now called the Cauldrons of Posey, it's told that there was an 11th century monk who was very sympathetic to the poetry that was supposedly scripted in the 7th or 8th century, but he realized that as he read it, because the language did change from the 8th century to 11th, believe it or not. And so what he was reading, he thought was a load of gobbledygook. So he created art, and I haven't seen the art. Again, you have to go down into the bowels of the Trinity Library, which few people can get to actually see this artwork. But he did, this monk from the 11th century, who I haven't got a clue he is, supported the poetry with his art, and he may have updated, he probably did update the language somewhat to 11th century, assuming this is true. And the idea was to make it more readable for the 11th century scholars. So, babbling on here. Now, what we got here? That's a beautiful painting, said Fairy Tales New and Old. And who's asking a question here? What an adventure. Was anyone with you? No, I was by myself in that library. I forget what I was trying to find out. I think it was ancient harp music or specific. It was many years ago. It was about, oh goodness, how long ago would it have been? I think it was 14, 15 years ago. And I managed to somehow wangle a student library card that enabled me to go down there. I forget how I wangled it, but it was definitely a hack at the time, and I'm so pleased about it. But I wish I remember what it was actually for that I was doing that for. But yeah, I was quite amazed, this sort of gothicness of going through this tunnel with no windows, with lights that were flickering. It was like something from movies, you know, they were flickering on and off as if the bulbs were about to blow, and there was all the dripping water, and you walked through it, slosh, slosh, slosh. It was quite an experience. And then you opened up these sort of very gothic doors to get into it. Anyway, the only proven copy of the Cauldron of Posey is dated towards the middle of the 16th century. And that, of course, is another forward translation. And as I've mentioned, several of these old scripts, they're written and they try to justify their content as actually being a translation of older work. It could well be in the 16th century. It was a completely new work, but they had to make these stories up. And this is often the case with these manuscripts. They make these stories up. Oh, this was done in the 4th century. This was done in the 5th century. This was done in the 7th century, in order to give some stature to what they've got. This is not the original one thing. This is really antiquity. There was a lot of BS going on through the medieval times, and that in itself is not recognized. Anyway, the one thing that's on the side of the 16th century work, it may be mainly fiction as a process of attracting reference to older work. It may have just, in the 16th century, you got fragments of what this poem was. But again, that's what often happens, these older manuscripts, late medieval, they're picking up fragments of an old inscription. They don't get the whole thing. But of course, what we got in this is the content in the 16th century generally includes this 11th century art by this anonymous monk. Anyway, let me introduce the three cauldrons before I try to explain how they may operate with our own bodies. Now, cauldron, let's do a cauldron picture for the moment to get in the spirit of this. There we go, cauldron. It's known right through ancient Irish and Gaelic languages as a corrie, a C-O-I-R-E, a corrie. And that was a word that was applied to describe. I'll go back, I think, to there we go. There's a couple of corries as well. They're described as hollow hills, such as the so-called she hills. And in fact, that one on the right of that picture, that's known as the corrie na Shiga. So there you go. You got the words in both. The Shiga is a description of where the she live, and the fairy hills. And I don't know if you've been, I hope you have in a way, if you've been following the current Substack series that I've been putting up on, Substack on the Croak and Crom Dove. I think it was in the last episode I was saying about how similar the she word is to, oh dear, I'm going through a bit of brain fog. And it was something obvious. I thought, why hadn't I picked that up before? And now I can't even remember it. So I'll have to come back to it if I remember it. It was amazing how the she word was so similar to something from Europe. I thought, how didn't I recognize that before? You know, because I was doing an association of different words in that series, how Eastern European words are very similar to words over here. So I'm trying to rack my brain what I was, no, sorry, it hasn't come up, but there's a very close word, and I thought, oh dear, why didn't I see that before? And I hope before the end of the show, I'll think of it. Anyway, the corrie can be not only the cauldron, and what I said, the fairy hills could be sacred valleys. That's a common thing in Scotland, as well as the whirlpools, such as the Corrie of Wrekin off of the North Isle coast, which I've been showing on other nature echoes as well. So you got the first cauldron of the three in the body, the Coragorth, which is translated as translates out as the cauldron of warming, incubation, maintenance, sustenance, or nutrition, whichever way you want to translate it out. Now, the imagery of the Coragorth means it always reminds me of Dagda. Here, I definitely got a Dagda picture here somewhere. There we go. There's our Dagda friend there. Reminds me of Dagda and his cauldron of plenty that he fills up at this time of year, at the lunar time. And from the harvest, he shares out. It's a pot that never empties, and he shares it out to everyone from the lunar to harvest, so that nobody, no home, no cauldrons at home will ever be empty through the winter. And I also think of Crom Dove and his, or maybe her, cauldron of fertile seeds, which are to be sown to enable the first harvest at Lunacy now. So they're sown at Biltner. So even though Crom Dove is presented as a lunar image during these days, for many women, he's a midsummer solstice image. And you may read that from, again, it's on my most recent series on Substack. I think I mentioned that on the last episode that I put out a couple of days ago. But if he's carrying seeds, the seeds are sown after Biltner because the sun is warming the soil. So Dagda and Crom Dove rolls, they seem to have been somewhat transferred to the goddess Anya. I'll hide that for a moment. You could say that's the goddess Anya and Gronya during recent times, but I had to put this. That's my daughter Ivy, stood in a cauldron. Quite a typical pose for her. She does work for Weta. It's a film company, so it's not surprising. If you're not familiar, Weta did Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, also Avatar, that type of thing. So I had to find an excuse of her in the cauldron to include that. So excuse that. Anyway, the second cauldron is the Cora Erme. Have I got something for that? This can be translated as the cauldron of vocation, motion, quest, or journey. And that one there isn't anything to do with that. Well, it's quite fascinating because I don't know where it comes from. It's an old manuscript depiction of I'm not sure what bird, whether that is no, yeah, I'm not a dove, or whether it's I'm trying to think of the swan, whooper swan, something like that. It's actually swooping over and stealing the mead of the poet. So there's a cauldron of mead, which is supposed to be the nourishment for poets. And I think I might be talking a little bit about that shortly. We might talk about that when we get to Hazel. Anyway, it's something we've talked about before, but it's going to be perhaps more appropriate for now. But what I personally vision from the core MI is similar to what I vision from the passage from the south node to the north node in an astrology chart. And the south node to me is what we are born into from our water of the womb of both our physical mothers and earth mother, kayak maybe. And then we're always umbilically connected invisibly to that womb and its ancestry. It's not we're connected to that. We're born into it from the womb. We're also connected to that womb, connected to the ancestry that's delivered there as well. While we journey, I want to get another picture up here. There we go, a dragon depiction of the nodes. So we're always connected while we journey through our physical life towards the passing from this earth, and where our released water moves on from there to wherever it's going to go. Now to our north node, it's that's what we are collecting. It's the destiny, as some astrologers say, and it's what we actually transfer, what we transform from our birth through our physical life towards that destiny. So it's like the living path. And as an astrologer, I find it fascinating to look at the angles that these north and south nodes form as well with the rest of the chart. It's a kind of excellent mapping guidance, I find. Now, the third cauldron, you may be more familiar with this, the Cauldrons sauce. I'm getting another drink of water. Hang on a moment. I got something going wrong here. Be with you in a very. No, we're okay. That's okay. So the Cauldrons sauce is the. Sorry, I got computer casualty going on here. Anyway, the Cauldrons, which can be translated as the cauldron of knowledge often, but I prefer wisdom. For it to be called wisdom. And here's an actual curry in the landscape here. I love this picture of this. There we go. That place is actually called the Three Cauldrons. I can't remember where that is, but there's three pools and they call them the Three Cauldrons. And you may well have heard of the Cauldrons through Deirdre Wadding in County Wexford. There she is there. And, okay, that computer's still playing up. The two computers are playing up. Sorry about that. Deirdre, she's a facilitator of the Cauldrons School of Teaching, where it may be called, and she may describe it as ancestral Irish spirituality. And I feel that's what she teaches, and what the group teaches, is a deeper and wider learning than, say, the so-called pagan spirituality. And Deirdre and her associates, they run Irish Goddess workshops, Wheel of the Year workshops, storytelling classes, and they invite women to many ceremonies as well. And through Deirdre's husband, Rochi, he seems to be getting more active in men's gatherings and workshops lately too. So that was the next picture that I had, because it seems that women who join the Cauldrons are, the Cauldrons sisters really, are also engaged to dressing green when they share their performances, and that's why we got a picture of them in performances there. And men are certainly not alienated from any of their study and work, though. Deirdre is all for balance, equality, and fair play. Now, most authors and researchers that explore these three cauldrons believe that they actually are within us when we are born. But there are some researchers, some cauldron explorers, believe that each of these cauldrons only become present to us or become generated within us when we're ready. And each of these cauldrons, there's another, I think this is a better picture if I can get this up. It can be in one of the three positions. And here we go. We've got the middle one that's tilted, but the positions of these cauldrons inside themselves can be upright, tilted, or inverted, which really means upside down. Now, the positions of, I'll keep that up, I think, for a bit. The position of each of these cauldrons within us indicates the ability of each cauldron to function. So with the upright cauldron, that can hold, it's like a regular cauldron. If it's upright, it can hold and simmer its ingredients. But a tilted tilted cauldron, it allows the simmering ingredients to slip away. But then an inverted upside down cauldron, that cannot hold anything. Just like yoga teachers, I'm just thinking of yoga teachers now, how they link their work and training. A lot of them do. They link their work to training the kind of smooth flow of the ki life through the 7 chakras. But there are some yoga teachers, especially in Ireland, and that also teach physical postures that train and harmonize our bodies to actually align and improve the three cauldrons within us. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate that yoga today. I haven't got any videos. I haven't got anybody talking about that. But I'd love to hear from you, or if any of you are yoga teachers or you go to yoga classes who venture into this 3 cauldron philosophy, I'd love to see your notes. And now, so what's the role of each cauldron? I think that's what I'll get up to next. And we got a few, the Fairy Tales New and Old has got lots of questions today, which is fabulous. And the question here, how do we spell that word she you mentioned? The common one in Ireland is Sidhe. In Scottish Gaelic, it's much simpler. It's SI with the it's just SI with the follower on the top, the I. So there are, of course, some people that just say SHEE, and getting some distractions on the screen here that's not letting me get through to you. There we go. We're back in great action now. And right. Anyway, I was going to talk about the functions here. The core Gorith said to be the abdomen. That's where it's said to be positioned. That's the area of our belly and reproductive system. And that's our sites of receiving nourishment. Now, the word Gorith is ancient. It's a very obscure word. I can't even pronounce it right. But it's believed to be related to the acts or conditions of nourishment. So acts of nourishment is how we feed ourselves, and the conditions of nourishment is what surrounds us, even the unseen, that gives us nourishment in some way that improves our well-being. And so it's said that if we're born with this cauldron being upright, as this is necessary, upright cauldrons are necessary for maintaining our best health and for accumulating our defenses for our survival needs, such as building up and sustaining our immune system, for instance. Now, this cauldron, the top, that abdomen one, is seen to be very responsive to warmth and care, and conditions of trust, and conditions where there's no threat. Hence why in youthful and later life, this cauldron is responsive to it provides a responsive role in mating and union. So this Gorgoroth cauldron, it might spill onto its side, metaphorically, of course, during times that we have severe illness. And so its nourishment that it's got contained starts to flow out until conditions, our nourishment and the environment enable it to become upright again. Alas, if this cauldron turns totally to flip on it to its lips, as it said, that means upside down, that's unfortunately the point of our physical death, or at best, a near-death experience. So even with a near-death experience, it's prompting us to get that cauldron back up again. Anyway, the next one, the Coria Urmai, the second cauldron. This is described as the key to developing our poetic inspiration, and that's what comes from our Korshish. And it's our life's journey, our quest, even our destiny. And this cauldron is said to never be upright at birth. So we're born with it on its side, and it's up to us to make decisions and choices to decide which way that cauldron is going to go. Is it going to be upwards, or is it going to be down on its lips, as I just said? Now, the core Urmai does not hold knowledge. We're born with the empty of knowledge, but it's said that we're born with that cauldron initially warmed up by the description in the 16th century manuscript is the fire of knowledge. So it's warmed up by the fire of knowledge, which is up to your imagination. That perhaps can be described as an attraction to inspiration. But when we watch a newborn baby, it's always full of wonder, especially when it starts looking around, it starts crawling, and especially towards becoming a toddler. A newborn baby is always full of wonder. So the Coriomai is said to be the home of our heart and our lungs, and it's from this cauldron through which the processes and the expressions of our emotions happen, and from where the beginnings of our poetic art form start to be inspired as well, because a lot of poetry and crafts and arts we do, of course, is inspired initially, or it's molded or crafted by our emotions. Now, from the side slanting position that we're born with, this cauldron, as I say, has the warmth of knowledge, but it can hold very little, if anything. So this cauldron can actually be turned upwards through the understanding, expression, and transformation of our emotions. So the choices we make and how we deal with emotions decides where this cauldron is going to go. Now, one of the things I think must be obvious from me saying that, there are things like feelings like revenge, jealousy, which happen within us by our own choices. For example, they're not emotions that are going to fill it. They're going to turn it up on its lips. So how this Urbai cauldron turns towards upwards or towards being on its lips is totally influenced by our life choices, our experiences, maybe our attitudes. So the core Urmai is alternatively named the Cauldron of Motion because it emphasizes how this cauldron can so easily have an ebb and flow of emptying and then filling up again. It's very much a cauldron that moves with our lives in different directions. So we're not going to live with it totally up the whole time. I think that's the thing to accept. But if we have an intent of having that cauldron filling itself, then we are going to have a happier life. But it's one of those situations you can't have light without dark. So it is going to tip up sometimes. Anyway, the status of this cauldron's position is said to determine whether we ever experience the abundance of wisdom. It's said it needs to be upright in order to attract the wisdom from the third cauldron. So it's told that the Coriomai is not totally affected by our own choices in our life, which I've been indicating from now. It's also influenced greatly by what we inherit from our ancestors. And as Wendy would say, our past lives. And I think we can go back to the picture following the nodes on the dragon here, if I can get to the dragon. Let's bring this one up for a reminder that's mapped out on an astrology chart I mentioned earlier. And to me, it's also mapping out a chance to allow what we may call spiritual guidance. And what guidance can we have to heal any cauldron that's draining, that's influenced by our ancestral influence that's born into us. Now, Amigan's poem, it seems to suggest that the Kora Ermai will be upside down and remain there as long as we shut off the real gifts of inspiration. And one of the main causes of real gifts of inspiration, I feel, are temptations. And when there's a lot of temptations out there where if we take them on, we remain unenlightened. I think one of the things, and people say I'm overemphasizing it, but I think the current artificial intelligence is one of those temptations, because it seems easy, it's quite lazy, and that shuts off our gift of inspiration. That's one thing. That's one obvious thing. Some of the stuff that the Instagram influencers do, they're forever pushing temptations. You want to live the life of the person that's the Instagram influencer rather than bring out your own life. You want to duplicate that. And before there was internet, people used to do this from images and models and magazines. So it's not new. But that, to me, and it's illustrated in the Cauldrons of Poesy, that's unenlightenment. It's not the real gifts of inspiration. So the Kori Ermai is said to turn upright for those who actually trust and they use their inspiration rather than go for a temptation which is not really part of them. And if we make the decisions to trust and use our inspirations, and also become sharers of divine poetry, and our poetry more from action than from reading. And I'll try and explain that in a moment. Reading is wonderful because reading our poetry is wonderful for community inspiration as well. A lot of people have dealt with social justices in the past, even from medieval times, through the reading of poetry, especially if there's a harp, if there's other music background. If you can do the reading of poetry in an enchanting way, then the community inspiration is absolutely wonderful for getting a community response for better social balance, I'm trying to think of the word, social rights. And of course, in the Christian times, they use the Psalms in a way for doing this as well. But apparently, at least the 16th century manuscript makes it quite clear to anyone that no matter how lowly in our lives, any point of our lives, no matter how lowly we may think we are, we can always make choices that develop and move this cauldron back into an upright position. And the rewards of its contents when it is in the upright position is for everyone. It's not for an elite. It's not for a chosen few. It's not for the shamans who say, oh, you're not up to my level. It's not. It's for everyone. Every human living being has experiences of sorrows and experiences of joy. And both the sorrows and joy actually can turn the Kori Ermai up. Now, the Amigan poem translation actually, well, I call it a translation, the 16th century thing anyway. It mentions four sorrows, and these four sorrows being longing, grief, jealousy, and the pain of exile. Now, each sorrow can actually bring on inspired poetry and surprisingly lead the apprentice poet into a condition of upturned, healthy Kori Ermai. You know, we can do an apprenticeship for this. We can. But not only are there four sorrows mentioned by this poem, but there's also four human joys that can also turn the Kori Ermai cauldron upwards within ourselves. Now, the first is the joy of sexual mating, the joy of feeling free from any kind of wanting. That's the second one. There's the joy of poetic accomplishment. I think I'll find let's see, is this a joy of poetic accomplishment? Yeah, there's a nice picture for that, poetic accomplishment. And the fourth is inspiration that creates poetry. And that experience, there's a word that's becoming popular. It's an ancient word, imbas, is the description of inspirational poetry. So combine all those four joys. It's like leading into the procession of four practices of joy. If we're practicing those four elements of, I said practices of joy, let's leave it at that. If we follow that procession of those practices, it's what helps us to become a poet and seer. So this, even becoming a poet or seer, this seems to start with adolescence. It moves into apprenticeship, then it moves into accomplishments, and finally we're into a state of being where we trust true inspiration, and that suddenly brings a lot of clarity to all those other three rights I mentioned before. It brings us clarity to what adolescence, apprenticeship, and accomplishments are all about. And it's like, it's not only the three rites of passage of a poet, it's like the rites of passage in our own lives, like I was talking about, from the South Node to the North Node, you can read from the astrology chart. So to me, those 4 deeds of the year are like the seasons of a year. If you've got a newborn person, they're adolescent, sometimes selfish, of course. And to me, that's like the condition of spring. But apprenticeships, the time where we learn to mate, we learn to connect and trust, that's very much the summer and how the summer unfolds. And then accomplishments, we enjoy those during the harvest, the autumn and fall, such as in the past days, it was the harvest that actually cleared debts and gave prosperity as well. And that would be the time that people could accomplish a more comfortable place to live, certainly sufficient food. And then inspiration start unveiling through the winter, when though we may seem to retreat to survive when we go into more dream time because of the darker nights, although no location researchers believe the choriomai is in the chest. I believe it is. This the positioning of this cauldron is in the area of our chest, the heart, and lungs. Anyway, any more comments? I'll take a little break from that. This is a long one. I'm getting close to the end. No more comments from you. Any questions on this? I definitely love to hear from you. It is a very deep, and I put this together very quickly, so I'm kind of spluttering it out in a way. So I hope it's understandable. Anyway, we'll get to the third cauldron, the Corisus. It's clearly serving as a font of wisdom anyway, yet little is said of it in the manuscripts. There's little said in Imogen's poem in the 16th century manuscripts, that yet it's assumed that it's there. Now, I'm just as things are blurting, I'm starting to get a wee bit of, something else is happening here. I'll be with you in a minute while I get this up and running. Right, I'm on the road again. Now, the development of our translation of this third cauldron, it seems to be from direct personal sensory experience. So, of course, that's before we've got words. This is all about our senses. We don't get inspiration, we don't get wisdom from words. That's really in the knowledge department as far as I'm concerned. So perhaps words are too limited to explain this cauldron, to explain our wisdom. So this cauldron of wisdom, it said that when we're born, that's actually on its lips, it's upside down and located in the head. And the head is what ancients considered to be the seat of our soul, or at least the connection to all, which is what I'm more or less believe in. Now, some yogas will contest that and say that it's our heart that does that, not our head. But this wisdom cauldron is said to turn upright through our life, through apprenticeship, through training, and through our ability to have that experience, like you're at school and you're having trouble with a problem, and all of a sudden it's like a big vision comes before you that a teacher has been trying to explain, especially in mathematics, how to do a formula and so forth. Then all of a sudden you get this vision, I used to, and it suddenly all makes sense and you shriek, I got it. And I think that's what happens when you recognize your third cauldron is turning around in an upright position. And so it's not limited to ability to write poems with words and sentences, because poetry to us, we may interpret poetry as being a recital of words. But the Cauldrons cauldron within us can turn upright with poetry before that poetry actually turns or crafts into words. And now this could be described as being proficient in any art or craft, because sculptors, painters, they're not using words before they slap the paint on, or they actually chiseling away there. It's through a vision that's in their mind. But really, this is all about our connections and trust in the flow of inspirations from the unseen collective consciousness, not unconscious. We're not unconscious. We're totally conscious to those visions. But maybe through that invisible, where this vision may well come, and I talked about that with the dragon tail, always umbilically connected to the Earth Mother, maybe to our own mother, that invisible umbilical cord that remains with us from birth. Maybe that is the lead into that collective unconsciousness rather than the air around us. But often I present the imagery of fire on or in water. Let's see if I can get that. I'll bring this up. That's the next one. There we go. That's certainly one way of approaching cauldrons there. If you can get that one, I'm going to have a drink of water while you read that for a moment. And right, here we go. Fire on water. Fire in or on water. I think, well, that's an essential reaction from mating. And to spark the flow of the key, or whatever in Ireland we call it, the she and the key. There you go. How the word she and the key and the chi, because the key in the Orient in China, by most people in the Orient, is pronounced chi. We've got she. That's when I had the brain fog earlier, that's what I was thinking, is how she to me is so similar to the chi. And if you have a few hazelnut meads or something like that, you're not going to say chi, you're going to say she anyway. So I think that's my way of interpreting how close that is. So there we go. The she or the chi is the flow of life through all, not only humans, but all organic living things, the mammals, the birds, the insects, the plants, the trees, everything. Now, my own perception of this has come from a synthesis of Scottish and Irish she mythology. And also, I worked with a Chinese man who was brought up with traditional Chinese medicine from ancient sources. And on top of that, I was taught about spring wells. Most of what I talk about with spring wells in Ireland actually is what I learned through tribal people in Utah when I was working there. And as you well know, the traditional Chinese approach to medicine is through herbs, acupuncture, and other practices. And the practitioners of this traditional medicine in the Chinese approach, there's not the intent to provide cures. That's not the way they approach things. Their therapies are used to balance the flows of energy, called the chi there throughout the body, called the she here. And energy today, when we think of the word energy, there are some people that say, what's this new age thing, energy? What's all that nonsense about? But energy, I think we sort of reverse that around, because energy today is a word that we've applied probably from the Industrial Revolution to apply to machines that use energy, and they use energy from electricity, oil, steam even, and even pedal power. Bicycles, of course, is powered by energy, even though we're putting it into it. Now, the ancient Chinese, they approach therapy for our body in the image of the human or the animal body. And their approach, in order to apply the therapy, to apply the medicine, is turn the image of the human or the animal into the appearance of a garden. And they believe that in our bodies that we have irrigation channels. And acupuncturists, they talk about meridians. That's what they're talking about when they're doing this. So the chi, the key, or how I interpret the chi myself, is the flowing water that carries the nutrients to all growing things. Now, that's exactly what the water from a good spring well does, so that we now call holy wells. And the holy well, usually it flows very deep. The water that comes up to the surface, is previous to coming up to the surface, is flowed from the swallow holes down deep into the underground rocks. And there in the underground rocks, because it's deprived of oxygen, but it's more there's more ions, more charging, it chelates with nutrients from the rocks as it passes through them. So that energy from that chelating is regarded as heat. So that's why I present the imagery here of fire on water. I hope that makes sense to you. And when we light up a cauldron, of course, to make a casserole or to do a brew, I'm going to be coming up with that when I talk a series on Facebook. It'll be starting, I think, mid to late this month. The Alehouse Wires I'll talk a lot about cauldrons with that, and the brew and the mash and all the rest of it from there. So when we light up a cauldron, it gives us an imagery of fire heat upon water. Because of the heat of the fire, it does things to the water. We cast our spells, do our cooking, brewing, whatever it is. So with water, it's not only the spring wells that we now call holy wells, but we can refer to ponds, the lochs, the lakes, the rivers, and eventually the water of the sea as well. All this was sacred. Anywhere where there was water was sacred to ancient people. And I feel all water should be just as sacred to us today, and it just isn't. It's disposable. So whether the sun is shining or there's friction with the rocks that causes chelation, or there's warmth from any movement, the sacred then was always that this is the carrying of energy. And that energy needs to flow to keep us and all living beings alive. So energy flowing with the intent of creating balance also brings healing from that balance where needed. So that's the Chinese approach. And also the taking the honest, trusting inspiration from our living poetry. I think, there we go, there's another poet for you to illustrate that. But within Irish folklore, one of the most famous instances of the fire in or on water is the tale of achieving our imbas for Rosnai, the wisdom that illuminates, wisdom within us that illuminates. When we get visions, basically, and we feel that we need to use those visions in how we live, in our craft, in our apprenticeship, in our expression, and in the poetry we write. So this is famously explained through the imagery. I have to bring this through the imagery of hazelnuts that fall from the 9 hazel trees. And the most famous perhaps is around Nexon's Well. And this is mentioned in the translation of Emmerdon's poems too. And all this imagery that I've talked about in past Nature Echoes and Nature Folklore sessions, there is the joy at the arrival of Imbas, which the 9 hazels of fine mast of Segas in the Shis Amas, and which is sent upstream along the surface of the boil, as extensive as a wether's fleece, swifter than a racehorse in the middle of June, every 7th year, regularly. Now that's in that 16th century manuscript, which swears that Hemingway wrote it, but I know jolly well he didn't. Wendy, great, she's got something out here. I like the description of how the sorrows as well as the joys can lead to inspiration and tipping up the cauldron. Yes, very reminiscent of how it works in transformative therapies and meditation practices and creating art. And I never thought of the North and South Nodes as cauldrons before. So thank you. Oh, I'm glad to, because Wendy is very experiential in what I'm talking about in a bit of different interpretations. So that's a real honor. I'm proud that I've actually shown Wendy something, because there's a lot she could show me. So that's terrific. And Jane here, Jan along from the YouTube, lovely, fascinating translation. Thank you for sharing, bringing these ideas together. And Jane is in Amsterdam, whereas Wendy is Dieft, which is not far from Rotterdam, I gather. So to continue those words, now what am I doing? I gave that poem out. I was reading that poem actually from a script. So there we go. Now I'm totally lost my thread here. So where are we going? Okay, from the poem, I'm trying to, now. I've lost the rest of my notes here. Anyway, wells called holy wells. Since the saints took over, of course, are called holy wells. They're revered by many people, and they're the in-between places where we describe, and I love these stories. This is what you get a lot of in Ireland, Isle of Man, in Scotland, England as well, also in, trying to think, some of the European places more than others, Lithuania for sure. And what's north of Lithuania? They're fantastic for the holy wells. Estonia. Estonia they're very involved in the entities that come from their wells. So there's there's a lot of belief in the entities, in the She, that travel through the water from the other world into our world, and they give us these amazing gifts. Though with the church influence, these amazing gifts are turned into an interpretation of mischief, which is what the fearful church has brought upon the nation. Anyway, next as well, I was just saying at Seagus, I'm trying to think of the modern town land name for that. It still exists, but it's a private landowner who limits the days that people can visit. I think it's 3 or 4 times a year. I'm not sure what it's called. Anyway, the next as well, it's the source of the Boyne. And then we got the Connellar's Well, which is the source of the Shannon. And where Connellar's Well is up for debate. Some say it's the Loch Key, which is near Boyle. And others, the most popular one's the Shannon Pot up in Cavan as well. And it's a beautiful place to visit. And there's also stories of Connellar's Well, actually fresh water, sacred water bubbling up from under the sea. But I tell various versions about those wells in other Nature Echoes and Nature Folklore editions. And I hope you don't mind me. This is the longest one I've done for a while. I always say I'll keep this half an hour, but this is a long subject. When I was putting it together quickly, and God, it's one of these things, visions are coming, memories, so forth. So I'm plowing it all into you now. Anyway, a common thread in such tales of the wells is the quest for magical wisdom that's contained in that natural spring water, the holy wells. And those quests, the tales that are told of those quests, they always come out as being very dangerous, don't they? And the quest in Ireland always tends to be following a poetic inspiration that we call Embas. In Wales, that's Awan. And both of these, the Embas and the Awan, are about filling the Corshish cauldron that also turns the Cor Ermai cauldron. You get the Corshish right, and the Cor Ermai is going to turn upwards, and it will sustain the top, the bottom one that's in your abdomen, the Cor Goreth, remaining upwards. And there we go. We got all the 3 cauldrons upwards, and with all 3 cauldrons upwards within us, ourselves as poets, we have totally connected to divination, to the divine. And I tend to describe that as being the clairvoyance of the land, when you're actually in a point of the landscape and you feel and sense everything about that. The visions keep coming to you, the ancestors keep coming to you, stories come to you. And I must admit, with storytelling, if I try and tell stories in a hall, I'm almost on this Nature Echoes. But when you're on a landscape near in somewhere, whether it's near, especially near water, You just can't stop me. Anyway, with many of my projects through my life, there's been three components. I've had three components like what we described in the Three Cauldrons. And so there's some kind of nature connection. I always have a platform for sharing our poetry, and also the sharing of food that brings on wonderful social interaction between us humans. I always feel that interaction is more important than the food, but it's the actual food that gives us the confidence and comfort in order to be open, trusting, and sharing, I find. So I think the best project that I did for this was hosting Bards in the Woods. I know the website hasn't been active for years, but it's still there, bardsinthewoods.com. And this was a lovely example. It's probably an experience that I will feed through the lens of the Three Cauldrons of Poesy when I think of it now. And actually, when I do my 1,500-word contribution to Sean Fitzpatrick, that's what my article was going to be. I'm going to be relating what we did with Bards in the Woods to these three cauldrons. It's because the nature walk, where we started Bards in the Woods with a nature walk, and that was for our Goreth cauldron. And this was nourishment, because we were getting nourishment from connection and what was around us. And some attendees, they did foraging as well. So they got some physical nourishment as well. And then we shared the picnic, which you would think would be the nourishment part, but that served as filling up my cauldron, because it may seem strange because you think of it being nourishment time rather than but the picnic was a social time, and that's what brought us together in trust. And what we exchanged there would definitely turn a few cauldrons a bit more upwards, I'm sure. So picnic time was a lot of fun, but it was also a time of sharing joys and sorrows with others. And each step of this, all these cauldrons were going up, and it probably increased appetites as well. So picnic food was eaten quite well. But it was always a trusted conversation setting, for one. Now, the third cauldron, of course, that's the imbus time. That was usually we shared our poetry and stories after the picnic. Sometimes it was before as well. Sometimes we got that a different way around. So as much as possible, these Bards in the Woods sessions were not just amongst trees, but they were beside water as well. So together, the key of understanding of the folklore of the Cauldrons of Posey and growing to understand and trust life in flowing water and its energy was there with us, because the water beside us, the water was stored in the trees as well. And trusting the poetry that this inspires within us, before that poetry becomes expressed as words, trust that poetry is there, even though there aren't words, it's a vision. The cauldrons remain upright when we're living a trusted journey on that path of inspiration. I truly believe that. So to me, though it's a bizarre, eccentric, and a cryptic folklore imagery that the Cauldrons of Poesy present for us, I believe it does inspire us to learn and work with this imagery. So using this imagery to respect and try to be part of a balancing life, as well as support for our own creative work as an inclusive work rather than an egotistical work. I'm going to finish off this echo. I was going to recite the Amalgam poem, but I've been on for well over an hour. So I hope you find that me dissecting that poem, or dissecting the 16th century manuscript at least, has been worthy of your listening and considering. So I hope to share the Cauldrons of Posey poem with you another time in some way. And is there anything else come up? We got something in. Absolutely fascinating. John says, Jane Lang, thank you for sharing and bringing these ideas together. I think I read that out before because of the Amsterdam. Well, thank you. It was worth reading that again. As the lunar says, sidereal time is the midpoint between summer and autumn. A bit of a reminder that we're coming up to that crossover time now. Let's get that. It's 1:10 a.m. here at Irish time, so only in a few hours' time. So it's whatever that is with you. For instance, Eastern Standard Time in the USA, it'll be 8:10. I think for you people over in the Netherlands, it's going to be 2:10 in the morning. And I was going to do a lunar echo, but as I've been with you for a long time already, I will finish off by wishing you wonderful lunar blessings as we cross that line. It's been too wet for cereal harvesting here in Ireland, but we got a lovely forecast the week ahead, I believe, and so it should be well underway. All the cereal and hay cutting should start happening from late Tuesday, I think, when the weather improves, and it looks like it's going to be good through Wednesday and Thursday. There's always a time we get a few days of this. Often it's the end of July, but this time we got to wait until the early part of August now. So I'm sure the farms are going to be very busy with their harvesting this week. Now, some of you probably, as I mentioned at the beginning, you probably had a grand day at Lunar Festivals because it is the weekend. It's the Lunar holiday weekend, and this holiday tomorrow here in Ireland. It was mainly sunny and quite warm for the festival goers today, except a bit drizzly early in the afternoon. But it's certainly, I haven't seen pictures yet, but I'm sure the fairly local Keju Roscommon Festival, they call it a harp festival, where you don't see a live performance of a harp. There's a hall that has a few competitions in it. I'm sure there's other things on at the festival. I'm sure they had a great time with that. I think they got Cherish the Ladies performing right now, if they haven't performed already. Anyway, those of you who subscribe to me on Substack, you'll notice I finished the Marathon Crom Crack and Crom Dove series there. I'm going to work on 1 or 2 journaling nature folklore course modules over the next few days. Then I'll return to complete the first harvest season, and this will be a few articles on apples and Avalon. And by the end of August, I'm to start with the Alehouse Wives series. I'll try to avoid the daily articles like I did with the Croms. I'm trying to stretch that series to 1, maybe 2 articles a week, because I'll stretch that out to take us quite close to Sawan. And I'll probably not write up any Sawan articles this year, because there's going to be many writers flooding the media with their interpretations of Sawan. So if I've got anything to say, I'll probably leave it till next year. Then from mid-November, you'll see me commence my Yule series, and that does include the folklore of reindeer, goats, as well as the famous Yule log. So thank you for watching this Nature Echoes this evening, this very long Nature Echoes. If you enjoy what we share live and through the Nature Folklore channels, please consider subscribing. There we go. Let's get my finger right. That's the address anyway. Subscribe to Nature Folklore through, Nature Echoes through the Substack. Oh, no, Nature Echoes. I get the two mixed up. That's Nature Folklore there. Subscribe to that because there is a free subscription. You get at least 40 informative Nature Folklore articles that's written a year. If you upgrade to become the support subscriber, which is what helps to keep the show on the road and helps me to pay my annual and monthly subscriptions to keep these shows going, and you get an extra 20 course modules of journaling nature folklore that you can join at any time, because it's a revolving course, not a linear one. And I'll get the 4 seasonal online live workshops going when I'm not so demanded on the writing as I think I have been this year. The cost is to be a support subscriber, €5 a month, or go for the 50% discount. That is €30 a year in your currency before Substack forces me to get up to 50. So thank you for your support. That's why I'm still broadcasting. And coming up on next Sunday's Nature Echoes, I haven't decided yet. Someone's probably going to approach me with something next week, and that's going to be the Echoes, because I tend to do the latest news. So what we got going here? And Jane is thanking me. Good blessings there. Thank you, all of you, for being here. It's been a real delight showing this to you. I've seen the numbers go up, which is fantastic. Thank you for all those lovely heart signs. What are they called? The icons that you put up. There's a lot of them today, so thank you very much for that. And thank you. If you're watching this as a replay, a lot of people do now. Keep posting comments and questions, and I always check and reply to those as soon as I can. A few people from the YouTube today, click the bell icon. That'll remind you of the next Nature Echoes coming up. So it leaves me to wish you a safe and wonderful, absolutely wonderful, inspired week, especially keeping your cauldrons upright. And there's all sorts of stuff going on here. That's right. Anyway, thank you so much. Enjoy the enchantments you get from the presence of water, the woods, all those mysteries of nature, as I say, that keep your cauldrons upright, keep them upright. So until next Sunday, play well. Thank you for being with me, and that's all I've got for now. Have a wonderful, if it's a holiday tomorrow, have a wonderful time, have a wonderful week. See you next Sunday. Thank you. Bye.